Oh, squee! It's the Security Weekly News wrap-up on Thursday. Yeah, how about that? For the week of 18 October 2020. Rudy Giuliani, Twitter hacks, Oracle patches, Sandworm, Singapore facial recognition, and Donald Trump says we don't need security. All this and more on the Security Weekly News wrap-up.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires discovery in depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery in Depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/Big ID. Increased attacks, skill gaps, talent shortages, expanding attack surfaces. Cybersecurity and IT teams face these real issues every day. CyberArray for Teams is the #1 NIST-aligned DoD 8140 and 8570 compliance certification and skills training platform. CyberArray for Teams makes managing teams easier, guarantees measurable training outcomes, and keeps your team's skills sharp to meet today's biggest security threats. And did you know 96% of the Fortune 500 have employees training on CyberArray? CyberArray for Teams. Now you know. Visit cyberarray.it/solved to solve your team training challenges.
All right. I am Doug White from Roger Williams University. I'm your host, and welcome to Security Weekly News wrap-up show a day early. All the show topics for the week. On Application Security Weekly number 126, Mike, Matt, and John. Their guest was Taylor McCaslin. He's the Senior Product Manager of Security at GitLab. This segment was to talk about current trends in application security testing. So, like actually testing the applications you use for application security, I think. And this is it's a really good segment, actually. And to get up to speed on all the new terms and the products that are out there for AST. So there's a lot of that stuff, and it changes a lot. So if you haven't checked into that in a while, you may want to check that segment out. On Business Security Weekly number 192, Paul, Jason, and Matt first had their update of the weekly Security Weekly 25 index. So if you don't recall, this is the index of the top stocks that they track on the show. So if you're interested in investing, if you're interested in the sector, all this is definitely a show you want to check. I always look forward to it because I can see how much money I could have made if only I had money to invest. But, you know, that's the way it goes. In the second segment, the crew talks about CISO stress busters. CISOs have stress? I don't know. Maybe. I'm kidding. InfoSec hiring, narrowing communication gaps, amongst other things. So there's a whole bunch of interesting things to talk about there. On Enterprise Security Weekly, number 203, Matt and Paul had Ed Bellis, the co-founder and CTO of Kenna Security, to talk about vulnerability management, along with some security or some research on vulnerability management by industry and platforms, remediation, and how risk informs remediation strategy. So an interesting segment there. And on the last segment, Corey Bodzin, the CTO of Deepwatch, was on to talk about the Deepwatch Lens Score app and how it can help CISOs hit their security objectives. So they're also talking about Series B funding for Deepwatch and what they're going to do with all that sweet, sweet cash when they get it. Note to self, don't say pirate ship when you're funding meetings. That's why I'm here instead of, with my IPO. But, hey, whatever. Somebody wants to fund a pirate ship, I think it's a good idea. I mean, really, think about it. On the Security Weekly News number 75, Danny Akoshki, I butchered his name so many times. Sorry, Danny. He's just going to be Danny for me. But Danny was the guest from Gigamon, and we had a fun talk about how to talk to management. And we also talked about something I'm going to talk about repeatedly today, about Donald Trump saying that security didn't matter because you can't get hacked on Monday in a campaign event, something that really bugged me a lot. because I hate that. But we'll talk about it later. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 48, Jeff, John, Josh, and Scott had Steve Schlarman on. He is the Integrated Risk Management Strategist at RSA Security, and he was on to talk about anecdotes and lessons learned about how risk management programs have been challenged this year and how they should adapt moving forward. For a second segment, David Muntink, the principal security consultant at Herjavec Group, and Ivan Sarini, the co-founder and CEO at Ferroot Security, joined the crew for a discussion about how application security flaws are being leveraged by malware to capture credentials, transactions, etc. on the front end of web applications. So they were primarily talking about how people are really focusing on getting that data right off of the web form, because that seems to be the weakest point. They were also talking about a paper that they had written about how backdoors in the client side of web apps can lead to breaches and GRC compliance issues. So again, they always have really interesting segments. For at least they're interesting. I mean, we have shows for everybody. That show is particularly interesting to me. On Paul's Security Weekly number 671 later today, the first segment is with our friend Corey Thune from Gravwell. Corey is the co-founder of that company, and he's going to be on to talk about Sysmon. And Gravwell has put out a Sysmon kit. So if you don't know, Sysmon's a free tool from Microsoft that is in the sysinternals collection, and it provides all kinds of data that you can extract from the system. So this is definitely going to be, I'm looking forward to being, I'm actually going to be on, so I'm looking forward to that one. In the second segment, Scott Schefferman, the principal cyber strategist at Eclipsium, will be on to talk about how attackers are going below the belt, or more specifically, below the operating system belt, to hide from your software and your targeting and your solutions. And so they're basically starting to target hardware and firmware. He's also going to talk about the UEFI rootkit. I talked about that on the news a few weeks ago. We talked about it on the Pulse Security Weekly a few weeks ago, but it's a UEFI rootkit, if you can imagine, called Mosaic Regressor. And that's, I'm really excited to hear what he has to say about that, because I was sort of like floored by that UEFI thing, because I had just not really thought about how that works and how that could be compromised. So it should be fun. And of course, we'll have the news. My favorite threat of the week then is going to be misconceptions of security. In particular, misconceptions of security by upper management, or even misconceptions about security by sitting presidents. Seriously. I got really incensed by Donald Trump on Monday. I know people, Donald Trump, that's sort of his thing, is he likes to say things that get people worked up. But that one really hit home with me. And this isn't a political show, so I'm not going to talk about politics. Hate him, love him, I don't care. But I do care when the President of the United States, a somewhat influential person, decides to say something so incredibly naive that it just literally shocks me. Must not comment on Donald Trump. Okay. I'm not going to say anything else about Donald Trump. Well, I will, but so what he said is nothing new. I mean, it isn't. I've heard this in 1986. I've heard Donald Trump. I said it again. I heard Donald Trump say again. I heard him say this back in like 2015. He said some stuff about hackers. But back in 1986, I did a pen test. It wasn't called a pen test on my employer, and I was told, look, only you and a bunch of weird nerds would ever figure this out. So what do we got to worry about? It's not a threat. I mean, this is the same security through obscurity nonsense that is used all the time today. I mean, think about that. 1986, I mean, what is this, 40 years later? I mean, we're still sitting here, and we still got upper management. We've still got the President of the United States saying, oh, nobody can figure this out. It's too weird. No one can figure out your password because it's Big Daddy 69, right? I mean, that's got numbers and letters and everything. So Donald Trump said, I said it again, that you have to have 15% of the password and an IQ of 197 to hack something. That's what he said. Really, I mean, that's a quote. I'm not taking it out of context. I'm not. I'm not even attacking him in particular in any kind of political way, because I've heard this exact same thing from upper management all over the place, and he's wrong. but I know where he gets it. I mean, I hear it from management. I've heard it a bunch of times. You recommend they use two-factor authentication, and the CEO says, son, I locked my Camaro out there in the space that says CEO Cowboy, and I used one key. 2 keys ain't going to make no difference. So if some low-down Yankee wants to come steal it. No, the guy that was saying this was from New Jersey. I actually knew he was from New Jersey, but he had this whole persona thing going. I mean, over and over. And the more complex the issue, the worse it gets. This CIO asked me to explain what an SQL injection was. And a CIO asked me to explain what an SQL injection was. And I said, well, in a logical OR, and said, well, I'm going to stop you right there. And she said, whoa there, partner. I'm going to stop you right there. Logical OR? Is Mr. Spock going to beam down from the Enterprise and hack us? Oh, you know, what? Or even, you know, stuff like this system's never been hacked because it's resilient due to its proprietary nature. Now, that guy was from Texas, but he didn't sound like he was from Texas. And when he said that, when he said about it being resilient and all that, I logged in as SecOffer with the password SecOffer because I knew that existed on that system and changed the root password so he couldn't log in. And then he was like, well, now that's a quandary. And I wonder, you know, I wonder how this was done. Can anyone here advise on this? Anyone? Bueller? So it's frustrating. I get it. But we have to work harder to communicate with our management and ensure that they understand that the internet means that any 10-year-old can be Mr. Spock, Mr. Scott, and Zephram Cochrane all rolled into Yoda just using a cell phone. So obscurity doesn't work now. It didn't work then either, but it just took a lot more effort in 1986 to find out obvious things. The term social engineering of management came up with Danny on the news show, and I really like that. I'd never heard anybody say that before, and I know it has kind of a negative connotation, but it really was a good idea. But when the president comes on and he says your whole field is useless because, you know, everyone is stupid, I guess we'll have to take the flattery that he thinks I have an IQ of 197, and 15% of Big Daddy 69 is B-I. So do with that what you will. Have fun. And so now the news from all the shows and some other news too. Cisco Firepower Threat Defense and ASA software has quite a few vulnerabilities that you probably need to fix. The first of these is in the Firepower Chassis Manager, and it's CVE 2020-3456, which is pretty bad, actually. And it can allow an attacker to get someone to click a targeted link, and then they use a cross-site request forgery attack, which is a token-based thing, to get control of the device. So 4 other vulnerabilities in the Firepower brand can also be used to do similar things. I'm not going to read all the CVEs. You could get them out of the article, and if you're using Cisco, but they're all listed there. And some of those can result in a denial of service on your Firepower device. So Firepower 2100, 4110, and Threat Defense software are all in this warning. Additional denial of service flaws were patched in the ASA, so that's the sort of pre-Firepower firewall. I have 2 ASAs, and I just ordered a Firepower, so I'm going to see how they're different. But the ASA had a denial of service in it that was, and it was also another flaw that allowed remote attackers to force a reloading of the device to be a denial of service. So that's, you really don't want that going on. There are also flaws in the web services of the ASA and the Firepower Threat Defense web services tools. So basically, don't put those outward facing. But yesterday, Cisco sent an advisory that a CDP, so that's a Cisco Discovery Protocol vulnerability in iOS XR, was also being actively exploited and allowed for remote code execution or reloads. Ouch. So patch your firewalls. Geez, it was a rough week for them. Sophos. I have problems with vowels sometimes. Sophos revealed a proof of concept that demonstrated that a custom IPv6 packet could be generated with Python, which we all know that's easy enough to do, that would effectively attack TCP/IP.sys. So TCP/IP.sys is a kernel driver in Windows. I don't know. It may exist in pre-Windows 10 systems. I think it does, actually, but it's a kernel driver for the stack. They basically put a video in this article that shows them exploiting. It said they're exploiting CVE 2020-16898, which showed that the attack would basically give you a blue screen of death. So they created a new IPv6 ping of death, so a super ping or something like that. Very much, when they were running at it, I was thinking ping of death, and it's not a ping packet, mind you, but it's sort of like that. And they did not provide any information about exactly what they did. So they said, we're not going to show you how we did this. We're just going to show you that we can. And they didn't want to turn this loose on everybody without giving, I guess, Microsoft a chance to patch it. But it's a very interesting article with a nice video where they provided the proof of concept. So you may want to check that out for sure. The Department of Justice of the United States filed charges against Sandworm Group, which is a component of the Russian GRU military group. So this is the Russian military, and we all know about Sandworm and GRU and all that. Basically, if you watch the press conference, which I did, and then I did read the indictment, they pretty much painted this group as being involved in every attack on everything for a while. I mean, from the 2016 election to the Winter Olympics to the 2017 French elections, pretty much anything you could think of, they were somehow trying to subvert it. And I mean, I guess that's what they're being paid to do, right? I mean, they're a nation state. They're getting funding. Somebody's pouring money in there and saying, hey, go out and cause trouble. So that's what they're doing. However, the Justice Department was very careful to avoid any mention of interference in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, which I thought was a little bit strange. But I guess the truth is it's an indictment. So that means it has to be based on evidence. So they're not just, speculating or saying, hey, they're bad people, they're probably doing things all the time. They actually had, I presume, evidence of all these other attacks. And I'm guessing they don't have any evidence, and the election hasn't happened yet, so who knows? President Donald Trump has repeatedly said that Russia does not pose any threat to the United States, but apparently the Justice Department feels a bit different and went after this group. The CIA has said that Vladimir Putin, who's the president of Russia, may be backing a variety of measures to attack Joe Biden's presidential campaign. No proof of that was provided in the article. It was just something that was released, and I don't know who released it or who, it's one of those, people said. At the CIA, anonymous sources at the CIA. But none of that was mentioned in the indictment at all, so they left all that out. The named suspects, which are in the indictment, if you want to look them up, are located in Russia. At least that's what they speculate. And this article says that they're unlikely to be extradited to the United States. So, I guess this way you have a standing indictment with a warrant for somebody. So if they ever come to the United States because they get a paper accepted to DEF CON or something, which, maybe they will. They may want to come to DEF CON and present their paper, and then they'll get grabbed at McLaren Airport in Las Vegas. Wouldn't that be ironic? But it's happened before, right? Singapore will become the first country worldwide to use facial verification in their national ID scheme. The idea is that if they include these facial biometrics in a government database, citizens will be able to use this in place of passwords and other biometrics for their government access, so like doors, computers, you name it, for their banking needs and other amenities, just like you use facial recognition on your phone. So Mr. Kwok Kwek Singh said that this was an effort to be innovative in the use of technology to benefit the citizens and businesses of Singapore. Facial rec's nothing new, but privacy advocates, who are also nothing new, are concerned that the facial data will be made available to police or third parties or who knows who, or it'll get hacked and people extract it and or corrupt it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all the same sort of privacy issues that you've heard people talking about for years about facial recognition and other biometrics is certainly here. DBS Bank is already a part of the beta trial of the system, and Lee Xie Ling of Topan Equaria, which is it's a consulting firm in Singapore, who is implementing the technology for them, said there are numerous safeguards in place to ensure it is a secure process. I mean, they always say that, right? Mr. Kwok insisted that no data would ever be shared with third parties and users would be provided with other options. It wasn't clear to me if you could opt out. I thought it meant you could opt out, but it said that other options would be available. So maybe you don't have to use it's like Microsoft Hello or something. You can still use your password if you want to. They did say that banks would have access, and they did say other amenities. So the minute you start sharing the data, well, I hope all those other groups are equally secure. I mean, we've certainly seen that plenty of times, right? So this is all locked down, but unfortunately, the vendors that come in to restock the vending machines aren't, and we all know how that goes. And how long is it before you want to use your government ID to get a snack out of the ramen machine, because they have great vending machines in Singapore too, I think. A series of threatening messages were sent to U.S. voters who were registered as Democrats in Alaska, Arizona, and Florida that said, vote for Trump or else. And then it went on to say that they had all of your information and they would take action unless you did what they wanted. The emails were from a spoofed address, or maybe a spoofed address, that was officialproudboys.com, which is a domain belonging to a far-right group in the United States. It's been associated with all sorts of things in the various protests this year. So won't get into that. No politics, just as interested because it was an email attack. At a press conference on Wednesday from National Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe, he said, we have already seen, and you have to listen to what he said carefully, we have already seen Iran sending spoofed emails designed to intimidate voters, incite voters, and damage President Trump, which might seem to imply that the emails may have come from Iran. But these weren't damaging President Trump, so I'm not sure what he was getting at. But ZDNet released an article that then said they hadn't seen any evidence that the emails came from Iran, and Mr. Ratcliffe did not provide any concrete evidence of the claims in the press conference. So it's not really clear who sent these messages. So I know people are working on this. There were several different people that were looking at this data, trying to figure out where these threatening messages came from. TrustWave released a report on Wednesday that claimed to have discovered detailed information about U.S. voters and consumers being sold on hacker forums. Imagine that. I don't think that's news to any of us, but they did go on to say that the sellers claim to have over 186 million voter records from the United States, which is pretty much all the registered voters in the United States, because if you're not from the United States, you probably don't realize that a lot of people here don't vote. It would appear that a lot of that data, in this report anyway, the Trustwave report, that some of this is scraped from public records and probably cross-matched with other data, so who knows how accurate it is. But it appears to be an attempt now to monetize the upcoming elections. The report also detailed databases for sale on the, quote, entire U.S. consumer population, as well as data on residents of Britain, Canada, Ireland, and South Africa. And considering the number of times my own records, including those that were filed with the Secret Service, have been breached, it's really just not that surprising that it's all out there somewhere. Oracle squashed 402 bugs in its latest patch, and 272 of the 402 were related to remote exploitation without authentication. Yep. These were flaws in financial services, MySQL, Communications Fusion, retail apps, e-business, and pretty much every component of Oracle Financials and all those different types of Oracle components. At least 2 of the bugs have 10 out of 10 ratings, and there were like 70 or 80 of them that were like 9.8 and up. So basically, if you're using anything from Oracle, you're probably going to want to jump on that and start patching. I mean, that was their recommendation. So they released this huge set of patches, but they're not automatic, so you probably want to get involved in this right now. A lot of news came out this week about celebrity Twitter hack back in July. A report which came out on Wednesday revealed that the 17-year-old hacker and his accomplices basically just used good old phishing techniques on Twitter employees to get them to go to a fake VPN site and enter their information. Wow. So it's not a hack. It's just, con stuff. Yeah. They used the information to post pleas from Barack Obama, Elon Musk, and a whole pile of other celebrities on July 15th, trying to get people to donate Bitcoins to this account. And they did manage to get around $118,000 US in the attack. According to the report, 4 employees at Twitter fell for the phone call. It was literally a phone call from the fake IT department, an oldie but a goodie. And they provided their VPN passwords on the fake VPN site they were instructed to go to. The hackers were then able to get into the Twitter site via the VPN and compromise accounts from, I think, the Twitter God mode. So this report was issued by the New York Department of Financial Services, recommends to the federal government of the United States that they should designate an agency to regulate cybersecurity at major social media companies. Now, if you weren't aware, Rudy Giuliani, who's the former mayor of New York and recent Borat prank victim, more on that in a second, is the current cyber czar for the Trump administration. So I guess you call him. I think his number is like posted on a bunch of sites, but yeah. And so finally, sorry, I can't resist. Rudy Giuliani, who does act as Mr. Trump's cyber czar, was apparently a victim of pranking by Sacha Baron Cohen. And now the footage of this prank is contained in the soon-to-be-released sequel to Borat. I think that comes out on the 23rd of August. Mr. Giuliani has claimed that the suggestion of any inappropriate acts by him is a complete fabrication. But in the hidden camera scene, Cohen, who is really famous for pranking politicians and pretty much everyone else, apparently arranged for Mr. Giuliani to do an interview with an actress, a Bulgarian actress, who was pretending to be a journalist who was acting as Borat's daughter, who's supposed to be 15 years old in the film. And so she was Borat's daughter pretending to be a journalist who wanted to interview Rudy Giuliani. So according to Vanity Fair, which is where I got this article from, and it's worth checking this article out because they got the whole transcript of all the things Borat says in the scene, which is really funny. But I haven't seen the film, and I don't work for Vanity Fair, so I don't get this kind of fancy pre-release stuff. But you call me, Sasha, call me. But Mr. Giuliani follows the interviewer into the bedroom of the hotel, lets the actress sort of poke around and remove his microphone and the microphone cell from his pocket, and then he lies down in the bed and he inserts his hand into his pants. Now Giuliani later said he was tucking his shirt in. I don't know. Watch the scene, you decide. Borat comes bursting in the room, yelling, "She's 15, she's too old for you," and starts begging Mr. Giuliani to take him instead. The actress is 24, and Mr. Giuliani didn't. They said that Mr. Giuliani did not know the actress was supposed to be 15 or anything like that. So this is just sort of for fun. And but Mr. Giuliani called the NYPD, filed a complaint. Anyway, sounds like a lot of fun to watch. So I'll probably check that out when it comes out. Anyway, that's the news wrap up for the week of 18 October 2020. I will be back right here in a couple of hours, except I have to sit over there on Paul's Security Weekly. So I hope to see you there. Learn how to recognize Sacha Baron Cohen. I think that's probably like a big tip for everybody out there. Really.